Good morning, fourth grade. Welcome to math class and another week of online learning. Today is Monday, May 11th, 2020, and let's just jump right in to our lesson with our application problem. So our application problem for this week, as you read it, you're going to realize it's pretty similar to the one that we saw for last week. So our problem is a concert hall has 20 rows of seats with 88 seats in each row. How many seats are there in the concert hall? Draw an area model to represent and help you solve this problem. So we need to figure out how many seats there are in that entire concert hall. But remember, just like we have been doing all year, because this is a word problem, there is a lot of information in there that we don't necessarily need in order to help us solve this problem. So we are going to go through it and identify and choose the information or the clue words to help us figure out how we can solve this problem and how we can figure out how many seats there are in the concert hall. So I did that, and I highlighted the fact that there's 20 rows of seats in the concert hall. That's pretty important. I need to know how many rows there are from the very first row all the way to the very last row in the back, the 20th row. That's very, very important for me to know. I also need to know, great, there's 20 rows. That doesn't really help me though. I also need to know how many seats are in each of those rows. So I also highlighted 88 because that helps me, that tells me if I have my 20 rows with 88 seats in each row, that I'm going to be able to figure out how many seats total there are in the concert hall. So what I would like for you to do right now is I would like you to stop or pause this video, and I would like you to solve the problem. And then when you're ready, I would like you to come back and we'll go through it together. Good luck. Okay, so here is all of my work that I did to solve the application problem. It's a little bit crazy. There's a lot of stuff on this page, but I took my 88 seats in each row and I times it by my 20 rows because that is going to be the quickest and most efficient and the easiest way for me to figure out the total number of seats in that concert hall. Now I could take, because I know in my first row I have 88 seats, in my second row I have 88 seats, in my third row I have 88 seats, etc., etc. So technically I could add up 88 20 times. However, that's a lot of work, and because it's so much adding, there's a lot of room for mistakes. So remember that multiplication is the same exact thing as repeated addition. It gets us the same exact answer. It's just a little bit quicker and a little bit easier to find the answer. So what I did is over here, I set up my area model. I set up my area model, and I first made sure that I broke up my 88 into 80 and 8. I broke that number into the two place values, and I put it at the top of my area model. Here's my 80, here's my 8. Then I put my 2 10s or my 20 over on the side, so I know that I'm going to multiply 20 times 8 and 20 times 80. So now inside my area model, just like we did last week, I'm just going to take my 20 times my 8, and I'm going to do all my work for that right here in my right-hand box. So my 2 10s times my 8 1s gives me 16 10s, or 2 times 8 is 16 with 1 0, and I put it right here as my partial product, 160. Then I do the same thing for 20 times 80. 2 10s times 8 10s gives me 1600s, or 1600, 1600, or 1600, which I put as my partial product right here. Then I have both my partial products. I figured them both out. I just add them together to get my final product of 1760. So I always remember we always need to finish by putting our answer into a complete sentence. So, whoops, the very last word is cut off by the video box. But the sentence that I created, there are 1,760 seats at the concert hall. So my lesson objective for the week, I can multiply 2-digit by 2-digit numbers using 4 partial products. And we started the process of that last week with multiplying 2 digits by a 2-digit multiple of 10. And we got 2 partial products in last week's work. Today, both of our factors are going to have 2 digits in them, which will in turn give us 4 partial products that we will need to add together to get our final product. So before we start our lesson, I just want us to very quickly review some of the vocabulary words that we had gotten used to using in the classroom. Our first word is factor. And a factor is basically just a number that we multiply by another number to get a product. So all the multiplication problems that we've been solving last week and just the ones that you, when you're practicing your fact fluency, always have 2 factors that we're multiplying together. Our second vocabulary word is product, which is the answer to a multiplication problem. And then our third vocabulary word is partial product. Basically, that means that we're breaking down our factors into their, place values to make multiplication a lot easier to help us be able to do it more mentally. So those are our vocabulary words that I just wanted to quickly review. Let's get into our lesson for the week. Okay, so the very first problem that we're going to be solving is 34 times 17. Now, as you can see, this problem looks kind of similar to what we did last week, but also a little bit different than what we did last week because we still have 2 2-digit numbers, except if we look at our second number, our second factor that we're multiplying, it is not a multiple of 10. It is just a regular 2-digit number. We are going to use the same strategy that we learned last week, or we practiced last week, I should say, which is using the area model to help us with some mental multiplication and being able to break down our numbers and making it easier to multiply. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw an area model. So I'm just going to draw a rectangular diagram. Boom, done, nice and easy. Then the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my very first factor. So the factor that's on the top of my equation, which in this case, it's 34. And I'm going to break that down by place value. So I know I have a 3 in my tens place and a 4 in my ones place. So I have 3 tens and 4 ones, which is 30 plus 4, 30 and 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 30 and my 4, just like I did last week, and I'm going to move them to the top of my area model, just like this. So I have a special designated place for my 3 tens, my 30, and I have a special designated place for my 4 ones or my 4. And then again, I drew my line to separate my tens from my ones. That's step 1. So now that we've figured out our first factor, 34, we need to move to our second factor, which in this problem is 17. And as you can see on the screen, I already did it for us. I broke our 17 into tens and ones. 17 has 1 10 and it has 7 ones. So 10 plus 7. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, just like I did last week with my second factor, I'm going to take my 10 and my 7, and I'm going to move them to the side, the vertical side of my area model, and write them the same way that I wrote my 30 and my 4. So I'm just going to put my 10 up at the top, my 7 down at the bottom, and then just like I did with my 30 and my 4, I need to separate my 10s and my 1s. So I'm just going to draw a line horizontally across, just like that. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4 different separate boxes inside my area models that I need to go through one by one. Now there are 4 boxes, and I want us to start relating this way using the area model to the standard algorithm. So I want us to make sure that we're very, very careful in the order that we solve these problems. So as you can see over my standard algorithm, I have the 4 1s and my 7 1s circled. I always start in the 1s place, and that is the partial product, or the part of the equation that I'm going to solve first. So first thing I need to do is I need to find my 7 1s and my 4 1s in my area model, which I did. I circled them for you to make it a little bit easier to see. You can do that while you're working if it helps you. If it doesn't and just confuses you, don't worry about it. That's fine. Now, it's also very important that I make sure that I put my, my work or my partial product, my answer, in the right box. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out, I'm going to move my finger along the 7, and I'm going to bring my finger down from the 4, and whichever box they meet in, that's where I'm going to do my work for 7 1s times 4 1s. And I'll show you what that means in case you're a little bit confused. So what I did was I just drew a line straight across from my 7, or if you want to use your finger and not draw a line, that's fine. You can do that on your area model. And I did the same thing with my 4. And you can see where they meet up. They meet up in this bottom right-hand box. Sorry, the video is in the way. It cuts off the box just a little bit. But that is the box where I'm going to be doing all my work to solve my 4 1s times my 7 1s. Okay, so like I said, we are solving our 7 1s times our 4 1s down in this box down here. And you can see that I already did it. 7 times 4 gives us 28. So that is the very, very first partial product that we are going to put into our standard algorithm. So all we're going to do is we're going to just move that 28 over into our standard algorithm as our first partial product, and just put it right there. And that's it. We solved 1 out of our 4 partial products. Good job. Okay, so I already took care of my 7 1s times my 4 1s. Now I need to multiply my 7 1s by the 3 10s in 34. Now it's very important for us to remember that we're not multiplying 7 times 3. We're multiplying 7 times 3 10s, which is 30. 7 times 30. So just like I did for the first part of my, to figure out where my first partial product went, I need to figure out where I'm going to show my work for this part of my problem. So I'm going to identify or find in my area model my 7 and my 3 10s. which I did for you. Again, you can circle them if you want, if it makes it easier for you. If not, don't worry about it. Then just like I did before, I'm going to figure out which box I'm going to show my work in. So just like I did before, I can either draw a line or I can move my finger until they both meet, kind of like when you're using a multiplication chart. That's how you figure out what the product is. So when I do that, I see that my 7, I move it over this way, bring down my 30, and they meet in this box down here, this lower left-hand box. So that is where I'm going to put all of my work as I'm working to figure out what 7 ones times 3 tens is. So the problem that I'm solving in this part of my area model is 7 times 30. And that problem is a little bit bigger than the 7 times 4 that we just solved. But as we remember, we can break this down and use mental math to help us figure out what our product is. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at my 7 times my 3. Because I've been practicing my multiplication facts, I know that 7 times 3 equals 21. Then I notice that one of my factors has 1 0. 30 has 1 0, 7 has no zeros. So I'm going to add 1 0 to my 21. I'm going to add it to the end of my 21, which gives me 210. So 7 times 30 is 210. Then just like I did for my 28, I'm going to take my 210 and I'm going to add it as my second partial product to my standard algorithm equation, which I did just like that. Again, I know I've been saying this since we started virtual learning. Please try your best to make sure that you line up all your ones, all your tens, and all your hundreds, and if we have thousands, all your thousands together, so that way it keeps your work nice and neat and organized. All right, so the next step, we already took care of multiplying our 7 ones by 34. So now we need to make sure that we multiply our 110 by 34, and we're going to start by multiplying that 110 by our 4 ones. So what I'm going to do on my area model, just like I did for the last 2 partial products that I did, I'm going to circle or identify or make sure I just super pay attention to my 10 and my 4. And then just like I did, I'm going to bring my fingers together or draw lines to figure out which box I'm going to be completing my work in. So I did that, and I can see that I'm going to be completing my work in this upper right-hand box right here. So the problem that I'm going to be solving in this box is taking my my 110 or my 10 and multiplying it by my 4 ones. And our 10 times tables are super easy, so you should be able to just off the bat know what this is, and our product is 40. So again, just like we did with our last 2 partial products, we're going to take this 40 and we're going to move it over into our standard algorithm, and it's going to be our third partial product that we add to our standard algorithm. If you would like to, what I would like you to do is to please stop this video, and I would like you to work by yourself to figure out what our last partial product is that we are going to add to our equation. And then when you're ready, you can start the video back up, check your work, and we'll continue. Okay, so hopefully you took a couple minutes to solve and figure out what our last partial product was. So now, as we said, we're working with our 110 that we're multiplying by 34, and we already took care of our 110 and multiplying it by our 4 ones. So now we are going to take our 110 and multiply it by our 3 tens. So when we do that, we can see on our area model that pretty much just because we went through everything else, that we are going to be doing our work for 10 times 30 in this upper left-hand box right here. So when we do that, again, 10 times 30, those numbers seem a little bit bigger than we're probably used to, but remembering that we already know and we have the strategy and the tool in our minds of mental math, we can do this problem super, super easily. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look and I'm going to see that I have a 1 times 3, which I already know is 3. Then I'm going to put my attention on the zeros in my factors. 10 has 1 0, 30 has 1 0. So there are 2 zeros in my factors that I'm going to bring down into my product. So when I do that, I'm going to add 2 zeros after my 3, which gives me 300, because like I said last week, remember that, think of it like 10 times 10 equals 100. Tens times tens equals hundreds. 110 times 310, 3 tens equals 300. So then all I do is the same thing that I've done 3 times before, is I take my 300 and I move it to my standard algorithm as my fourth and final partial product. Again, making sure I do my very best to keep all of my numbers nice and neat and organized. Okay, so once I have all 4 of my partial products figured out and added to my, my standard algorithm, all I do then is I add them up. So I take my 28, my 210, my 40, and my 300, and I add them up, starting at my ones place. And when I do that, I get 578. So look at that. Even though this problem, when we see it, it might be a little bit intimidating at first, remember that we have the tools of using an area model and using mental math to help us break this problem down and figure it out in a much less scary or a much less intimidating way. Okay, so for your independent practice, I am giving you 4 problems that you can do. Your must-do problems, I would like you to complete number 3 and number 4. And as you can see from the directions on the page, it's asking you to please draw an area model, just like we did in the lesson together that we just did, and recording the partial products on the side the same exact way that I went through this lesson. Then I would like you, if you would like to do some extra work, you can either do one, you can do both of them. If you would like to, that's fine. Number 5 and number 6. So what the directions say is to visualize, and I know you're used to visualizing and you've heard that word in ELA and science and social studies, kind of think of a picture of it in your mind. So visualize the area model. So you don't necessarily have to make one, but if you just think about it, you can absolutely make an area model for number 5 and number 6 if you would like to, but also if you want to try to visualize it, that's awesome. You can try that. And writing out your partial products the way that we did during the lesson, just without the area model, because eventually we're going to move away from using the area model. But like the directions say, and like I said, you can absolutely use an area model. You can draw it out if it helps you and if you find that much more easy to do that way. I'm asking you to please bring problem number 3 and number 4 to your Zoom on Wednesday, and we will talk about how we got our answers, and we'll talk about if anyone had any frustrations or anything like that. So we will talk about that on Wednesday. So for your Tuesday math work, if you are able to get on Zearn.org, I would love for you to do that. This week, you only need to work on completing lesson 36. However, if you did not complete the work last week with lesson 34 and 35, unfortunately, you are not able to move on to lesson 36 until 34 and 35 are done. I'm not able to skip those 2 lessons. So for this week, just lesson 36. However, if you did not do the Zearn last week, you're going to have to do lesson 34, 35 before you get to 36. I would like to give a really, really, really big shout out to Dante from My Homeroom again for completing all of the lessons that he needed to. And also, I'd like to shout out Mr. Jaden from Ms. Mosel's class for completing lesson 34 and 35 on Zearn last week as well. Good job, guys. I was so happy to see that. I hope that next week I have some more friends that I'm able to shout out. Okay, and then for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, if you already completed last week's teacher assigned iReady lessons, which was the 2-digit by 2-digit multiplication, then you are good. You can continue working on whatever iReady assigns you. However, I'm going to be going in and looking to see who did not get to work on those assignments, and I will reassign them to you. So you will have the opportunity to work on those. One of them, just like it was last week, one of those assignments will be available on Wednesday, I believe it's the 13th, and you have until Sunday to work on it. And then the second of those lessons will be available on Thursday and also will be due by Sunday as well. When you sign on Friday, if you completed both of the teacher assigned lessons, you can work on another teacher assigned lesson that maybe you didn't get a chance to do, or if you finished everything, then you can just move on to the next lesson that iReady would like you to complete. Don't forget, we have our 4th grade Zoom session on Wednesday at 11 o'clock, and I will see you there. Bye-bye.